The twin suns of Caliris Alpha cast their amber glow across the sprawling marketplace that stretched from horizon to horizon. Vendors from 1,000 worlds hawked their wares beneath translucent canopies, their voices creating a symphony of languages that the universal translators struggled to keep pace with. Steam rose from food stalls, serving delicacies that would make anyone from Earth question their understanding of biology, while holographic advertisements danced above the crowds in scripts that resembled everything from musical notes to mathematical equations to abstract art. Ray Cartwright wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted his tour guide badge for the third time in 10 minutes. At 28, he had the enthusiastic demeanor of someone who still believed the galaxy was full of wonders waiting to be discovered, despite 3 years of leading tourists through the safer sectors of interplanetary space. His sandy hair was perpetually disheveled from the recycled air of various starships, and his green eyes held the slightly unfocused look of someone who had seen too many alien customs demonstrations and was still processing most of them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ray announced to a small group of Earth tourists, raising his voice above the marketplace chaos. "Welcome to the Grand Bazaar of Caliris Alpha, the cultural crossroads of the galaxy. In just 24 hours, the Interplanetary Trade Festival will begin right here, in this very plaza. Representatives from over 300 civilizations will gather to exchange not just goods, but ideas, art, and traditions." A middle-aged woman from New Tokyo raised her hand. "Mr. Cartwright, is it true that some of the greeting customs here are unusual?" Ray's smile faltered slightly. "Well, Mrs. Tanaka, every culture has its own way of showing respect. The key is to observe and learn. Now, if you'll follow me, we'll head to the sector where the Andromedans display their crystal symphonies." As he turned to lead the group forward, Ray collided with someone moving in the opposite direction. The impact sent both parties stumbling, and Ray's standard-issue tour guide datapad clattered to the ground, its screen flickering with damage. "I'm so sorry." Ray began automatically extending his hand in the universal human gesture of apology and greeting. "I should have been watching where I was." He stopped mid-sentence. The being he had bumped into was unlike anything he had encountered in his 3 years of galactic tourism. She stood about his height with skin that seemed to shimmer between pale blue and silver, depending on how the light hit it. Her hair fell in elaborate braids adorned with what appeared to be small, glowing fruits. But what caught Ray's attention most were her clothes, a traditional-looking robe that seemed designed to emphasize, rather than conceal, her feminine form, particularly around the chest area. More striking still were her eyes, which held an intelligence and dignity that made Ray suddenly aware of how foolish he must look standing there, with his hand outstretched. The woman looked at his extended hand with what might have been amusement. Without warning, she pulled open her robe slightly and thrust her chest forward, presenting what were unmistakably melons. Not metaphorical melons. Actual fruit, though they seemed to be growing directly from her body, like large, perfectly round breasts that happened to be bright orange and shaped exactly like the Earth fruit. "Human," she said in accented but clear galactic standard. "You're supposed to greet my melons, not my hand. It's custom." Ray's hand hung in the air, forgotten, as his brain tried to process this information. Behind him, he heard Mrs. Tanaka's sharp intake of breath, and someone's universal translator producing an error sound. What Ray managed. The woman's expression shifted from amusement to concern, then to something that might have been alarm. "You are human, yes, from the planet Earth. You do know the proper greeting between humans and Melanari." "Melanari," Ray's voice cracked slightly. "You're Melanari, like from the Melanari system, the constitutional monarchy in the Outer Rim." "I am Princess Alaris of the Royal House of Melanari," she said, and now Ray could see the concern clearly written across her features. "And if you cannot properly greet my melons, we have a significant diplomatic problem." Before Ray could ask what kind of diplomatic problem, a figure materialized from the crowd, literally materialized, as if stepping through an invisible doorway. Ray recognized the uniform immediately diplomatic corps, probably from the Interplanetary Alliance Embassy on World. "Mr. Cartwright," the newcomer said, and there was nothing casual about his tone. "I am Ambassador Zanrick. We need to talk, immediately." Ray looked from the princess to the ambassador to his tour group, who were staring with the kind of fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "There has been no misunderstanding," Princess Alaris said firmly. "By failing to greet my Melons properly, you have accidentally declared either your romantic intentions or your desire for ritual combat. Our translators are still determining which." Ambassador Zanrick, a tall, slender being with gray skin and far too many eyes, closed several of them in what Ray was learning to recognize as the universal gesture of exasperation. "Princess Alaris, with respect, this human clearly had no knowledge of your customs. Mr. Cartwright, exactly how familiar are you with Melanari diplomatic protocol?" "I know they grow fruit on their—" Ray gestured helplessly at the princess's chest area, "and that there are newest trading partners, and that insulting them could destabilize the Outer Rim Accords." "Correct on all counts," Zanrick confirmed grimly. "What you may not know is that the princess has been sent here specifically to formalize Earth's inclusion in the Melanari Trade Alliance. The greeting ceremony is scheduled for tomorrow night, in front of representatives from 300 worlds." Ray felt the blood drain from his face. "The Trade Alliance?" Princess Alaris nodded. "The Melanari Parliament has voted to extend membership to Earth, contingent on proper cultural protocols being observed. The greeting of Melons is not mere politeness human. It is recognition of life force fertility, abundance, and mutual respect. To refuse it is to declare that you find the Melanari, and all we represent, unworthy." "But I didn't refuse," Ray protested. I didn't know. No one told me about melon greeting." "Ignorance," said a new voice, "is no excuse for diplomatic incompetence." Ray turned to see a figure approaching through the crowd. This one was clearly Melanari, but unlike Princess Alaris, his fruit appeared to be small, dark, and wilted. His robes were more ornate than hers, deep purple with silver threading, and he walked with the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Count Drazek," Princess Alaris said, and Ray noted the tension in her voice. "I was not aware you had arrived on World." "I came as soon as I heard about the incident," Count Drazek replied, his gaze fixed on Ray. "The Parliament will be very interested to learn that Earth's representative is already violating our most sacred customs." Ambassador Zanrick stepped forward. "Count Drazek, Mr. Cartwright is merely a tour guide. He is not Earth's official representative." "Is he not?" Count Drazek's smile showed far too many teeth. "He wears the badge of the Galactic Tour Association. Does he not, an organization licensed by Earth's government to represent human interests in cultural exchange? By law, he speaks for his planet." Ray looked down at his badge, the one he had adjusted nervously just minutes ago. The small print he had never bothered to read suddenly seemed very important. Princess Alaris closed her robe slightly, her melons now partially covered. "Count Drazek, surely we can resolve this through discussion." "The law is clear, Your Highness," Count Drazek interrupted. "This human has refused the sacred greeting. He has disrespected our ways in front of witnesses. Unless he can demonstrate proper melon greeting protocol before the trade festival begins, the alliance with Earth must be dissolved. And furthermore," Count Drazek continued, stepping closer to Ray, "I will be forced to recommend to the Parliament that this human be tried for cultural crimes against the Melanari people." Ray found his voice. "What would that mean?" "Exile to the asteroid mines of Proxima Void," Count Drazek said cheerfully. "For approximately 50 years, Earth standard." The marketplace around them seemed to have grown quieter. Or maybe that was just the blood rushing in Ray's ears. His tour group had backed away to what they clearly hoped was a safe distance, though Mrs. Tanaka was still close enough to be filming everything on her personal recorder. "There must be something I can do," Ray said. "Some way to learn the proper greeting." Princess Alaris and Count Drazek exchanged a look that suggested volumes of political history Ray didn't understand. "The greeting ceremony is tomorrow night," Princess Alaris said carefully. "If you could demonstrate proper protocol before the assembled representatives—" "Impossible," Count Drazek interrupted. "The sacred greeting cannot be learned in a day. It requires understanding of our history, our agricultural practices, our philosophy of life and growth. No outsider has ever mastered it so quickly." "Then I'll learn it," Ray said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "I'll learn everything I need to know." Ambassador Zanric made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Mr. Cartwright, I admire your determination, but Count Drazek has a point. The Melanari greeting ritual is incredibly complex. It involves not just physical gestures, but understanding of Melanari poetry, agriculture seasonal ceremonies, and philosophical concepts that don't translate well into galactic standard." "Then I'll find someone to teach me," Ray insisted. "Princess Alaris, surely you could—" Princess Alaris shook her head. "I am forbidden from instructing outsiders in the sacred protocols. It would be seen as favoritism and could damage my own standing with the Parliament." Count Drazek's smile grew wider. "However, I see no reason why the human shouldn't be allowed to try. It will make his inevitable failure all the more educational for everyone involved." With that cheerful threat hanging in the air, Count Drazek turned and walked away, his wilted fruit bouncing slightly with each step. Ray looked around at the marketplace, at the hundreds of species going about their business, completely oblivious to the fact that his next 24 hours would determine whether Earth got to participate in the most lucrative trade agreement in the galaxy, or whether he personally got to spend the next 50 years mining asteroids. "Ambassador Zanric," he said, "I don't suppose the diplomatic corps has any crash courses in Melanari culture." Zanric closed several more eyes. "Mr. Cartwright, I've been a diplomat for 40 years. I've seen wars started over incorrect cutlery usage and peace treaties saved by proper hat removal. But I've never seen anyone learn Melanari protocols in a single day." Princess Alaris was silent for a moment, then spoke quietly. "There is someone who might help, but I cannot be seen arranging such a meeting. If you were to find yourself at the Crystalline Quarter tonight near the shop of the memory merchants, and if you were to ask about stories of the old greetings—" She didn't finish the sentence, but instead adjusted her robes and walked away, leaving Ray standing in the marketplace with a tour group, a diplomat, and about 23 hours to save his planet's economic future. And possibly his own life. Ray spent the next hour mechanically leading his tour group through the remainder of their scheduled stops, his mind churning through possibilities and fears in equal measure. Mrs. Tanaka kept giving him sympathetic looks, while simultaneously making sure her recorder captured everything for what would undoubtedly be the most exciting travel blog post of her life. Finally, as the group boarded their transport back to the orbital hotel, Ray pulled Ambassador Zanric aside. "What exactly happens if I can't do this?" he asked. Zanric considered the question carefully. "Best case scenario, Earth loses out on a trade alliance worth approximately 40 trillion credits annually. Count Drazek convinces the Melanari Parliament that humans are culturally incompatible, and we end up on the restricted contact list for the next century. And worst case, you get exiled to the mines and Count Drazek uses the incident to destabilize Princess Alaris's position in the royal court. There are factions within the Melanari government who believe the monarchy is too accommodating to alien cultures. A failed Earth alliance could be exactly the excuse they need to push for more isolationist policies." Ray watched his tour group's transport disappear into the afternoon sky. "So, basically no pressure." "Ray," Zanric placed a hand on his shoulder. "I've been in touch with Earth's diplomatic corps. They're sending a team, but they won't arrive until after the ceremony. It's up to you. Any advice? Learn fast. Learn well. And whatever you do, don't let Count Drazek know you're trying. He has a reputation for sabotaging those who cross him." As evening fell over, Caloris Alpha Ray made his way through the winding streets to the Crystalline Quarter. The memory merchant's shop was easy to spot. Its windows displayed floating globes of light that showed brief scenes from various worlds and cultures like snow globes, filled with experiences instead of snow. Inside the shop was larger than its exterior suggested, filled with shelves of crystalline storage units that hummed with the soft sound of preserved memories. An elderly being with translucent skin and silver hair looked up from behind the counter. "You seek knowledge of the old greetings," the shopkeeper said, before Ray could speak. It wasn't a question. "How did you—" "I am a memory merchant. I trade in experiences, knowledge, understanding. Word travels fast when a human needs to learn Melanari ways in a single night." The shopkeeper gestured to a small alcove in the back of the store. "Come, we have much to discuss and little time." The alcove was furnished with cushions that adjusted to accommodate multiple body types. Ray settled onto one, and the shopkeeper sat across from him. "I am Keeper Vess," the elderly being said. "I have been collecting memories of Melanari customs for 2 centuries. But before I can help you, you must understand what you are truly asking. I need to learn how to greet someone's melons properly, without starting a war or getting myself exiled." Keeper Vess made a sound that might have been laughter. "Young human, the greeting of melons is not simply a physical gesture. It is a celebration of life itself, a recognition of the sacred cycle of growth and renewal that defines Melanari society." "Okay, I'm listening." "The Melanari are an ancient people. Their homeworld is a paradise of eternal harvest, where the fruit that grows upon their bodies sustains not just them, but the very ecosystem of their planet. Each melon contains within it the genetic memory of 1,000 generations, the promise of future growth, the essence of their connection to the world that gave them life." Ray tried to process this. "So the melons aren't just decoration?" "They are life itself," Keeper Vess confirmed. "When a Melanari offers their melons for greeting, they are offering to share their life force, their history, their hope for the future. To greet them properly is to acknowledge all of this. And to refuse is to reject everything they are." "Precisely. But the greeting is more than acknowledgement. It is a dialogue conducted without words, a sharing of energy and intention that requires precise movement timing and understanding." Keeper Vess stood and moved to a specific shelf, retrieving a memory crystal that pulsed with soft green light. "This contains the memories of a master of the greeting ceremony, a Melanari diplomat, who spent his life teaching other species the proper protocols. With your permission, I will share this knowledge with you. But I must warn you, experiencing another being's memories can be disorienting." Ray didn't hesitate. "Do it." Keeper Vess pressed the crystal to Ray's forehead, and the world exploded into sensation. Suddenly, Ray was standing in a garden unlike anything he could have imagined. Trees bore fruit that glowed like stars, and the air itself seemed alive with energy. He was no longer in his own body, but that of a Melanari, feeling the weight and warmth of the melons that grew from his chest, understanding their significance not as external objects, but as part of his essential self. Before him stood another Melanari offering the traditional greeting. Ray watched No experienced as his hands moved in precise patterns, cupping the offered melons, not with possessiveness, but with reverence, his thumbs tracing specific spirals across their surface, while his mind focused on gratitude, respect, and the acknowledgement of life shared. The memory continued, showing him variations of the greeting for different seasons, different relationships, different ceremonial contexts. He felt the difference between the greeting offered to a friend, a stranger, a superior, a younger being. He experienced the subtle variations in pressure and duration in the silent intentions that accompanied each gesture. When the crystal's light faded, Ray found himself back in the memory shop, but he felt fundamentally changed. The knowledge was there, integrated into his understanding, as if he had always known it. "Remarkable," Keeper Vess murmured. "Most beings require multiple sessions to absorb even a fraction of such complex cultural knowledge. You seem to have a natural aptitude for cross-cultural understanding." Ray flexed his fingers, feeling the muscle memory of movements he had never physically performed. "I can feel how it should be done. But that's not enough, is it? The physical movements are only part of the greeting. You must also understand the spiritual and philosophical aspects." The Melanari believe that all life is connected through what they call the harvest web, the idea that every living thing contributes to the growth and sustenance of everything else. Keeper Vess retrieved another crystal, this one pulsing with golden light. This contains the memory of a human who successfully performed the greeting ceremony 50 years ago. Study his experience. Learn from his mistakes and his insights. This second memory was different, seen from a human perspective. It showed the greeting as an outsider would experience it. Ray felt the initial hesitation, the fear of making a mistake, but also the gradual understanding that the greeting was about connection rather than performance. As the memory faded, Keeper Vess handed Ray a small device. "This is a cultural harmonizer. It will help you maintain the proper mental state during the greeting. But remember, technology cannot replace genuine understanding and intention." "Thank you," Ray said, meaning it more deeply than he had ever meant anything. "How can I repay you?" "Succeed," Keeper Vess said simply. "And remember that customs exist not to divide people, but to create deeper connections. Show the galaxy that understanding is possible." Ray left the memory shop with new knowledge, new purpose, and very little sleep ahead of him. He spent the rest of the night practicing the movements, using his hotel room's wall mirror to perfect the gestures he had learned. The cultural harmonizer helped him maintain focus, but he knew that tomorrow night would test more than just his physical preparation. The next day arrived with alarming speed. Ray barely had time to grab breakfast before Ambassador Zanric arrived at his hotel with news. "There's been a development," Zanric announced. "Count Drazek has been spreading word throughout the diplomatic community about your situation. Half the galaxy will be watching tonight, and not all of them are hoping for your success. Meaning that if you fail, it won't just affect Earth-Melanari relations. Other species are watching to see how humans handle delicate cultural situations. There's a lot more at stake than we initially thought." Ray's stomach dropped. "No pressure, right?" "I'm afraid not, but there's more. Princess Alaris sent a message." Zanric handed Ray a data tablet. "She couldn't risk meeting with you directly, but she wanted you to have this." The message was brief. "Remember that the greeting is not about perfection, but about sincerity. Trust in what you have learned, and trust in the connection between all living things. The harvest web extends beyond species boundaries." "Cryptic," Ray muttered. "Royal communication often is. But Ray, I've been thinking. Count Drazek seems awfully eager for you to fail. Too eager. I've had my people look into him, and there are rumors that he's been working with certain factions in the Melanari government who want to severely limit alien contact." "You think he's sabotaging this on purpose?" "I think he sees an opportunity to use your failure to advance his own political agenda. Watch out for him tonight." The trade festival opening ceremony was held in the Grand Plaza, a massive open area surrounded by towering spires that represented different galactic civilizations. As evening approached, the plaza filled with beings from across the galaxy, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of creation's infinite variety. Ray stood in the designated area for the ceremony, uncomfortably aware that thousands of eye sensors and recording devices were focused on him. His hands were steady, but his palms were sweating inside his gloves. Princess Alaris approached from the other side of the plaza, walking with measured steps toward a raised platform in the center. She wore ceremonial robes that seemed to be made of woven starlight, and her melons were adorned with flowers that glowed softly in the evening light. Count Drazek stood nearby, his dark robes, making him look like a shadow among the celebration. Ray noticed other Melanari gathered around him, all wearing expressions of either anticipation or disapproval. Ambassador Zanric appeared at Ray's side. Remember, you have allies here. Don't let Drazek's supporters intimidate you. As Princess Alaris reached the platform, she raised her hands for silence. Her voice, amplified by speakers throughout the plaza, rang clear and strong. Friends from across the galaxy. She began, "We gather tonight to welcome Earth into the Melanari Trade Alliance. This is a moment of great significance, marking not just economic cooperation, but cultural exchange and understanding." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. As is traditional, the alliance will be sealed through the sacred greeting of Melons, performed between myself and Earth's representative. She gestured toward Ray. Ray Cartwright stepped forward. Ray's legs felt unsteady as he walked toward the platform. The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath. "Wait!" Count Drazek's voice cut through the silence. "Before we proceed, I must raise a concern." Princess Alaris's expression remained calm, but Ray saw her hands tighten slightly on her robes. "Count Drazek, what concern?" "It has come to my attention that this human has been studying our sacred customs with outside help. The greeting ceremony requires pure intention, not mechanical mimicry learned from memory crystals." Gasps and murmurs erupted from various parts of the crowd. Ray felt his heart racing. Furthermore, Count Drazek continued, "I have detected the presence of technological aids on his person. He carries a cultural harmonizer, clearly visible to anyone with proper sensors. How can the greeting be sincere if it requires artificial assistance?" Ray looked at Princess Alaris, who was clearly trying to maintain her diplomatic composure. Around the plaza, he could see various alien dignities discussing this development with concern. "Count Drazek raises a valid point," Princess Alaris said finally. "The sacred greeting must come from the heart, not from technology or memorized movements." "Then I propose a test." Count Drazek announced his smile, showing he had planned this moment. "Let the human demonstrate his understanding not through rote performance, but through interpretation. Let him explain to the assembly what the sacred greeting means to the Melanari people." Ray felt the weight of thousands of stares. This wasn't what he had prepared for. He had memorized movements, practiced gestures, studied the technical aspects of the ceremony. But Count Drazek was asking for something deeper. He thought about Keeper Vess's words. "Remember that customs exist not to divide people, but to create deeper connections." Taking a deep breath, Ray reached into his pocket and pulled out the cultural harmonizer. Without hesitation, he placed it on the ground and stepped away from it. "Count Drazek is right, Ray," said his voice carrying clearly through the plaza's acoustics. "The sacred greeting shouldn't require technology, and he's right that I learned the movements from memory crystals." Disappointed murmurs arose from the crowd, but Ray continued. "But what I learned wasn't just movements. I learned that the Melanari don't see themselves as separate from their world, their community, or even their crops. The melons aren't just fruit, they're a living connection to everything that came before and everything that will come after." He looked directly at Princess Alaris, then at Count Drazek. "When a Melanari offers their melons for greeting, they're not asking you to touch their body. They're asking you to acknowledge their entire existence, their past, their hopes, their place in what they call the harvest web. They're inviting you to recognize that we're all connected, all part of something larger than ourselves." Ray turned to address the crowd more broadly. "I'm human. My species greets each other by touching hands, a simple contact that says, 'I recognize you as like me.' But the Melanari greeting says something bigger. 'I recognize you as part of the same universe that sustains me.' It's not about their customs being weird or difficult. It's about their understanding being deeper than ours." He faced Princess Alaris again. "I may not have been born understanding this, but I've learned. And I've learned that the point isn't to perform perfectly. The point is to approach with genuine respect and willingness to connect." Count Drazek stepped forward. "Pretty words, human. But understanding and ability are different things. Can you actually perform the greeting properly?" "I believe I can," Ray said. "Not because I memorized it, but because I understand why it matters." Princess Alaris studied Ray for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "The sacred greeting requires no words to accompany it," she announced to the crowd. "But rarely have I heard its purpose explained with such clarity by a non-Melanari. Ray Cartwright, if you are ready, I offer my melons for greeting." The plaza fell completely silent. Ray could hear his own heartbeat as Princess Alaris opened her ceremonial robes, revealing her melons in their full glory. They were perfect specimens, round and golden with skin that seemed to glow from within. Ray approached slowly, his hands steady now. He could feel the weight of history, the pressure of diplomacy, the eyes of the galaxy upon him. But more than that, he could feel the connection Keeper Vess had shown him, the understanding that this moment was about more than politics or protocol. He extended his hands, cupping the princess's melons, with the reverence the memory crystals had taught him, but with an intention that was entirely his own. His thumbs traced the traditional spirals across their surface, but he wasn't thinking about technique. He was thinking about growth, about connection, about the responsibility of different species to understand and care for each other. For a moment that seemed to stretch beyond time, Ray felt what he could only describe as the harvest web, a sense of connection not just to Princess Alaris, but to everything around him. The crowd, the plaza, the planet itself, the distant stars. All of it connected, all of it part of something larger and more beautiful than he had ever imagined. When he finally released the melons and stepped back, the plaza remained silent for several heartbeats. Then, Princess Alaris smiled a genuine, radiant expression of joy. "The Harvest Web acknowledges this greeting," she announced. "Earth is welcomed into the Melanari Trade Alliance." The plaza erupted in celebration. Beings from hundreds of worlds cheered, music began playing from various cultural groups, and holographic fireworks exploded overhead. But Ray barely noticed any of it. He was looking at Count Drazik, whose expression had shifted from smug anticipation to something much darker. "Count Drazik," Princess Alaris called out above the celebration. "Does the royal court have any objections to this alliance?" Count Drazik's jaw tightened. The greeting was adequate, but I question whether this human truly understands the depth of what he has agreed to. The Melanari Trade Alliance requires more than ceremonial knowledge. "Indeed it does," Princess Alaris agreed. "It requires ongoing cultural exchange, mutual respect, and continuous learning. Which is why I am pleased to announce that Earth will be opening a permanent cultural center on Melanari Prime, and that Ray Cartwright will serve as our first human cultural liaison." Ray blinked in surprise. This was news to him. Furthermore, the princess continued, "To ensure proper understanding of our customs continues, I will be establishing a reciprocal position on Earth where I will serve as Melanari Cultural Ambassador." Count Drazik's face went through several color changes. "Your Highness, surely such positions should be appointed by the Royal Council." "The Royal Council granted me full diplomatic authority in this matter," Princess Alaris replied smoothly. "Unless you wish to question their judgment." Ray could see Count Drazik calculating his options. To challenge the princess further would be to challenge the Royal Council itself, a dangerous political move. "Of course not, Your Highness," Count Drazik said finally. "I merely hope this human proves worthy of such trust." "I believe he will," Princess Alaris said, her gaze meeting Ray's. "After all, he has already demonstrated that understanding between species is not only possible but transformative." As the celebration continued around them, Ambassador Zanric appeared at Ray's side, grinning broadly. "Well," Zanric said, "I think it's safe to say you won't be mining asteroids anytime soon." Ray was still processing everything that had happened. "I'm going to be a cultural liaison to an entire alien species." "Congratulations," Zanric said. "You've just landed possibly the most challenging diplomatic position in the galaxy. And judging by tonight, I think you're exactly what this job needs." Princess Alaris approached them, having finished her official announcements. "I hope you don't mind the surprise appointment," she said to Ray. "But I meant what I said. Your explanation of our greeting ceremony showed a level of understanding that goes beyond memorization. The galaxy needs more individuals who can bridge cultural differences with genuine insight. I'm honored, Ray said, and meant it. But I have to ask, why did Count Drazek seem so determined for this to fail? Princess Alaris glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. Count Drazek represents a faction that believes Melanari culture should remain pure, uninfluenced by alien contact. They see alliance with species like humanity as a threat to our traditional ways. And do you? Ray asked. I believe that culture, like the melons we grow, requires both deep roots and new growth to remain healthy. Isolation preserves traditions, but prevents adaptation. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. Why should we limit ourselves to only one world's perspective? Over the following hours, the celebration continued throughout the plaza. Ray found himself meeting representatives from dozens of worlds, each curious about the human who had learned Melanari customs in a single day. Some were impressed, others skeptical, but all seemed to recognize that something significant had happened. As the twin suns began to rise over Caliris Alpha, marking the official end of the opening ceremony, Ray and Princess Alaris found themselves standing together at the edge of the plaza, watching the last of the revelers head to their respective accommodations. I have a confession, Princess Alaris said. When Count Drazek forced you to explain the meaning of the sacred greeting, I was terrified you would fail. I was terrified I would fail too, Ray admitted. But when I was standing up there, I realized something. The greeting isn't about being perfect. It's about being sincere. Exactly. And that's why I believe you'll excel as a cultural liaison. Many diplomats memorize protocols and procedures. Few take the time to understand the spirit behind them. Ray looked out over the plaza, where cleanup crews were already beginning to restore the space to its normal market configuration. Princess Alaris, can I ask you something? Please. Your melons, when I was greeting them properly, I felt something, like a connection to everything around us. Was that real, or just my imagination? Princess Alaris smiled. The harvest web is very real, though few non-Melanari can perceive it directly. The fact that you did suggests you have a natural sensitivity to what we call life force connections. It's quite rare among humans. Is that why you decided to make me a cultural liaison? One of many reasons, but primarily because you demonstrated something the galaxy desperately needs: the ability to move beyond fear and judgment to genuine understanding. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the sunrise paint the plaza in shades of gold and amber. So what happens now? Ray asked. I assume there's some kind of training for becoming a cultural liaison. Extensive training, Princess Alaris confirmed. You'll need to learn not just our customs but our history, our agricultural practices, our philosophical traditions. You'll also need to understand the political complexities of our society. Count Drazek and his faction won't simply disappear because tonight went well. And you'll be learning about Earth culture. I'm looking forward to it. I've read about human customs, but experiencing them firsthand will be fascinating. I understand humans have many different ways of greeting each other. Ray laughed. Oh, you have no idea. Handshakes, hugs, bows, kisses on cheeks, fist bumps, high fives, waves. And that's just the friendly greetings. I sense I have much to learn, Princess Alaris said with amusement. We both do, but I'm starting to think that's the point. As they prepared to leave the plaza, Ambassador Zanric approached one last time. Ray, Princess Alaris, I've just received word from both Earth and Melanari Prime. The success of tonight's ceremony has been noted at the highest levels. There's already talk of extending cultural exchange programs to include other species. Other species? Ray asked. The Andromedans are particularly interested. Apparently they've been watching tonight's events and are impressed by the potential for interspecies understanding. They've requested a preliminary meeting about establishing their own cultural exchange program with the Sol system. Princess Alaris looked thoughtful. The Andromedans have been isolated for centuries. If they're willing to consider cultural exchange, It could mark the beginning of a new era of interspecies cooperation, Zonric finished. And it all started with a human learning to properly greet some melons. Ray shook his head in amazement. 24 hours ago, I was giving tours to bored tourists. Now I'm apparently helping to reshape galactic diplomacy. The universe has a way of surprising us, Princess Alaris observed. Perhaps that's why it's so important to approach new experiences with an open mind and heart. As they finally left the plaza, Ray couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him to this moment. A chance encounter, a cultural misunderstanding, and the willingness of people from different worlds to bridge their differences had led to something larger than anyone could have imagined. He thought about Keeper Vess's words. Remember that customs exist not to divide people, but to create deeper connections. Looking ahead to his new role, Ray realized that every greeting, every cultural exchange, every moment of understanding between different species was a small but vital thread in the vast web that connected all life in the galaxy. And if last night had taught him anything, it was that those connections were worth whatever effort it took to create and maintain them. The twin suns of Caliris Alpha climbed higher into the morning sky, their light falling on a marketplace that was already beginning to bustle with new activity. Somewhere in that marketplace, beings from hundreds of worlds were meeting, trading, learning from each other, and creating new connections that would ripple outward through space and time. Ray smiled, straightened his tour guide badge one last time, and walked forward into his new life as a bridge between worlds, a life that had begun with the simple recognition that sometimes the most important thing you can do is learn how to properly greet someone's melons. After all, it's custom.